anyway, I'm back in my miserable self again. So we can get started. Some updates. Rich Burton, which had another obligation tonight, has taken over the Treasury, and after the Treasury is recovered from my Cancun trip, Rich called me. We have $952, and I think it's 38 cents. But anyway, we're in the black. And Jack, who I don't know where he went, but anyway, he's got something like $40 or $43 from last month that isn't in the Treasury yet. So we're almost at $1,000. A couple other things. Val Rona volunteered tonight. I've been kind of a one-man band for the last 3 months, as Mike's been busy at the Med Center and getting speakers and doing the postcards and updating the mailing list. And if anybody wants to volunteer to help out, especially on the postcards, what Val said he would do to save us some postage, I think we have about 65 to 68 who have given us their email address. And, you know, that's 68 times 42 cents that we can save on the postcards. So any of you fellows who may be getting postcards but have an email address and would rather get the information by email, put it on the yellow pad over here tonight. We'll update that, give it to Val, and start next month, then we can get the information out to email for those that have it. And anybody that wants to volunteer to help me out with the postcards, I'd be glad for that. The other thing is that I've about run out my string of guys and gals that I know personally that are World War II vets to come and speak to me. You know, I almost had to break a couple of arms, but anybody that has, Val told me tonight he's got about 3 or 4 fellows that he thinks might come speak, and any of you other fellows that have some friends, WWII vets that might want to come and tell their story. What I suggest you do, if they're a little hesitant, which I've run into a couple times, I said, come to a couple meetings. And of course, you all know how formal we are. And anyway, get them to see how easygoing our situation is here. And it's just a bunch of friends talking about World War II. So any of you that have some names and addresses and phone numbers of people that we can get in touch with to come speak to us that haven't already, let me know. One I want to have back, when we first started, one of the very early meetings, I had one of my Timberwolves come, John Light. I don't know how many of you fellows were here when we had John here, but John was wounded in the Moss River crossing, got the Silver Star because he went back across the river and pulled his buddy back and saved his life. And he lost his leg in the process. But he's a retired professor out at Dickinson College, lives in Carlisle. And I've already talked to his son. He went in for his hip operation last week, but as soon as he's healthy, we're going to be able to get him to come and tell us about my Timberwolves again, because only a fraction of you ever heard him before. He gave a very good talk. Anyway, the only other thing I wanted to mention, there's going to be a gal show up here a little while, Betsy Lacey. She's a teacher out at Mechanicsburg High School, and she's involved, and forgive me, but I'm not sure the accurate name of the program, but it's something about Heroes Trips. And they take World War II veterans to Washington, D.C. to see the World War II Memorial at no cost. And she's going to be here a little later. She had an earlier obligation, and she's going to have applications because they've got 4 buses, coaches, not school buses, and they're going to fill it with veterans, and then they want 1 assistant for every 3 veterans. So some of you who haven't seen the World War II Memorial, who aren't World War II vets, who would like to go, she's going to have applications for that tonight too. I know I'm going to go if I'm motivated by that. I think it's in May, but I think I have a date here. No, excuse me, it's April 20th, which is a Sunday. But anyway, she's going to be here tonight with applications both for veterans and for assistants. But she'll be here later on. I'll introduce her after the talk. So with that, Jim, where did you get to? There you are. Would you be good enough to introduce our speaker, Jim Brommer, who twisted the colonel's arm and got him to come talk to us tonight.
Good evening, everybody. I have two older brothers who were in World War II, two brother-in-laws who were in World War II, and a sister who worked in the hospital over at Uniontown Gap during World War II. So I grew up with it. And I got to appreciate the breadth of the world that you covered. All the theaters, because my brothers would talk about their friends and what they had done, and of course all of you who graduated in those years, right before the war and during the war, you knew where you were going to go. And they pretty much stayed in touch, and especially afterwards through the American Legion and other gatherings. So my cousins, I had 4 cousins at one time, and I believe they were all in the Pacific Theater in the different branches of the service. So one day when I was work for the Navy, Mechanicsburg, and this man came through. Heard him talking about flying and being careful of the people that were on the ground, because he wanted to be sure that the markings were clear for something. I knew he could only be talking about one thing. This man had to have been flying in a aircraft that was going to be dropping ordnance, and he was wanted to be sure of his line of demarcation between the friendlies and the bad guys. So after a while, and he was still there, I introduced myself, and I wanted to talk to him more, and I found out he lived close by me, too. So we got to be friends, and I got to find out that, indeed, he was a Bombardier on a B-24. There were B-24s, folks, not just B-17s. Even the 8th Air Force had B-24s. And I'm sure he'll share with you tonight. I've heard him speak before. He sticks to his facts, and how he became a Bombardier, how they picked up the airplane, and I'll let him tell you the story. I'd like to introduce to you now my friend Colonel Phil Etters from the Army Air Force.
I'm sure you were talking about me, too. Something doesn't sound right. Well, I'm in native Pennsylvania. How many of you know where Franklin County is? I was born in a little town called Shady Grove. On the 2nd of May of 1923, in a snowstorm, a guy by the name of Dr. Grove delivered me. In those days, the girls went home to have their babies, and my dad and mother lived in Waynesboro, and they went out to my grandfather's place for me to be born. I still go by that house every once in a while. I grew up in Waynesboro, graduated from Waynesboro High School in 1941, played 3 years of football. I wasn't very good, but I played football for Rip Engle. How many of you have heard of Rip Engle? He was our high school coach in Waynesboro from 1930 until 1941. Last time I talked to Rip, he came to Harrisburg to speak, and a guy from Waynesboro who was the congressman, House of Representatives, called me on the phone and he says, I have invited Rip Engel to speak at Schindler's Restaurant in Camp Hill Sunday morning at 9 o'clock. Would you like to come? I said, I sure as hell would. So I went over, took my grandson and my son-in-law with me, and they asked all of us that had played for Rip, there was quite a crowd of people there, to walk outside at the head of the steps. And Rip came in, walked up the steps, and there must have been 25 of us standing there that had played for him sometime during his 10 years or 11 years. And he walked up those steps and called every one of us by our first name. Every one of them. And he said to me, he says, how's Betty? I said, thank you very much, Rip, for remembering her. He said, well, you guys were an item in high school, so all the teachers knew of that. Anyway, I put this together tonight to talk about the B-24, not about me, but about the B-24. How many of you ever flew in a B-24? You always heard about the B-17. B-17 was built in 1935 by Boeing Aircraft and turned into a bomber from actually the thing originally was designed as a passenger airplane. And it evolved into a bomber. And when World War II broke out, we had B-26s, B-25s, B-18s, and about a whole array of twin-engine aircraft that we converted into bombers. And December 1st, 1939, Consolidated Aircraft was given a contract to design an airplane that would carry 8,000 to 10,000 pounds of bombs, carry it to 30,000 feet, and have a range of approximately 1,000 miles. By the end of 1939, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. By the beginning of 1939, January 1939, they got the contract. By the end of 1939, the first B-24 came off the assembly line. It was a D model. That was one of the first ones. D model, notice the glass front. Wingspan 110 feet, length 67 feet, gross weight 67,000 pounds on takeoff. It had, the original planes did not have turbochargers. When we needed more speed for takeoff, they put turbochargers on. There was a total of 18,500 B-24s built. Now, they weren't all used as bombers. The C-87 model was a cargo aircraft. In fact, the first Air Force One was a B-24 C-87. It was built especially for President Roosevelt And instead of a bomb bay, there was a place in there for him to sit, a davenport and tables and other things. But because the aircraft, when it was on the ground, was so low, he didn't have far to roll his wheelchair. It had 10 50 caliber machine guns. If you're familiar with the 50 caliber machine gun, it has a range of approximately 800 yards. But from the aircraft, our range was considered to be approximately 650 yards. Remember that number. On some of our missions, when we were flying in formation, and when you figured 10 50 caliber machine guns, and you have a formation of 10 B-24s, you got a lot of firepower. And the Japs learned you didn't mess with it. So what they do? Go out about 1,000 yards at the same altitude and the same heading and the same airspeed we were, and wave to us while they're radioing down to the anti-aircraft what we were doing. Now, they didn't have radar either at that time. On the 16th of March, over Quito Aerodrome, we had 4 500-pound bombs aboard that day, and we were flying off of Mindoro and McGuire Air Force Base, and we got 2 wounded men and approximately 100 holes in the plane. I have a piece of flak here, and luckily that day I had my steel helmet on. This is what we flew with most of the time, sans the glasses. But we had a throat mic, and we used this, and then you had your steel helmet on top. It looked a little bit like the ground steel helmet, except that the flaps on it came down over your ear. I was in the bomb site, bouncing around like a, I don't know what. And when I got back, I dug this piece of flak out of the airplane. The 50 caliber ammunition was there on either side in a phenol fiber box, and came up out of that box and was fed into the nose turret, and the nose gunner was firing. And I dug this piece out of the wood, the trail of the ammunition. The engineer came to me and he said, "Lieutenant, look what I found." And in the Bombay door was a machine fitting approximately 5 inches in diameter with a threaded hole in it, made in some factory out in Ohio. That was the bottom of the anti-aircraft shell that had put 100 and some holes in our airplane and wounded 2 men aboard. And it was made in Ohio. Funny things happen. particular mission, we lost our hydraulic fluids. I was summoned from the nose back to the waist. And as I went through the Bombay, the engineer was standing there tearing up his shirt and wrapping it around the hydraulic lines that were punctured so we could have enough hydraulic fluid to stop the airplane and put the flaps down and the gear down. Went back, took care of the radio operator who had been badly wounded in the left hip and the left arm, and the tail gunner who had been wounded. You wonder sometimes whether God is right when He decides when your time is. We got back, incidentally, in the rear of the B-24, two servo units were actually gyroscopes. They were hooked up to the automatic pilot. And the cables back that operated the rudders and the elevators came through the center of the aircraft, the ceiling. And if our gunner that was seriously wounded, who actually was the ball turret gunner, over there they had taken the ball turrets off, put flexible 50s under there, we fired by hand. If he'd have been where he was supposed to be, with his back toward the Bombay, he'd have been killed. So that aircraft shell went right straight up through and out the top, severing the cables. As soon as I saw the cables, I called the pilot immediately and said, "Don't take this thing off automatic power." And then I told him what happened. So we flew back on automatic pilot. We finally got the gear down. Landed on automatic pilot on a long approach. Hit the brakes. No brakes. Right off the end of the strip, out in about 4 feet of water. The doctor got on the aircraft. We had doctors at the strip when people were up in the air and coming back. Said, "Who took care of this man?" I said, "I did." He said, "Did you give him morphine?" I said, "No, sir." He said, "Why not, Lieutenant?" I said, "You see all these first aid kits laying around here?" There's 12 of them. I said, "There wasn't any morphine in any of them." He said, "You got to be kidding." I said, "No, sir." Performed an investigation when he got back, and one of the enlisted men was taking the morphine. The irony of the thing is that our man made it, but he could have died. Just because someone was on dope. And every time I think about the dope today and read in the paper about these people being in automobile accidents and that kind of stuff, that's the first thing I think of. B-24 went to England to replace the B-17s, but during the transition period, they had to fly 17s and 24s in the same formation. And in those days, the 24 was faster than the 17, and in order to fly them in formation together, they had to fly so slow that the B-24 almost stalled out. So they had to stop that and fly a squadron of 17 with a squadron of 24s. That's how they got their 1,000-plane raise. The 24 didn't replace the B-17 in the South Pacific until we had taken New Guinea. They phased it in through Australia, and we took New Guinea. My first mission was over Rabaul, out of Nadzab, New Guinea. I flew a total of 45 missions. We didn't fly the same airplane every day. We flew what planes were flyable. The dragon and its tail over there is probably the most notable B-24 in the Southwest Pacific. The guy that painted that thing painted every one of our aircraft. Put this thing together. I put it together to use with an overhead projector. Now everybody uses slides. So I'm going to pass some of these things out. This is the B-24 from the XB-24 up here in the corner down to the last B-24s that were built. The Navy used them as PB-4Y2s, and they had single tails, and they were 10 feet longer than ours. Every one of our airplanes were painted. We even had fighters coming in there and were guys who come in with P-38 and P-51. Wanted to know where the painter was. Their wife's picture painted on the side of their airplane. You'll find one of those pictures there are called Mabel's Labels. That's a picture of his wife. He finally asked if he could paint one airplane with his wife's picture. Probably heard the story about President Roosevelt. He said, "I hate war. Eleanor hates war." And we added to it, "And you hate Eleanor." Because she came over there and didn't like our airplanes with naked women on them, Vargas girls, and you name it. And she wanted them cleaned off. Well, I guarantee it never happened. The dragon and its tail, and it may be at either Lancaster Airport this year or Middletown, actually was built and shipped to American forces in India. And when the war was over, we left an awful lot of stuff overseas, I'll tell you. And they left quite a few 24s for the Indian Air Force. After they couldn't get parts for them anymore, a guy by the name of Collings, Collings, owned a factory up in New England somewhere. He bought one B-24J, disassembled it, brought it to the United States, had it refurbished, and that's the only B-24J that is still flying in these United States. The C-87 model, the Confederate Air Force has, that was also a B-24. There is a third one being refurbished, and I don't know who owns that. But I belong to the Collings Association. And one day I said to my wife, you know, for old time's sake, I'd like to take a ride in a B-24. She said, where are you going to find a B-24? I said, well, there's one coming into the airport between York and New Oxford. And I'm going over. I called a friend of mine in Waynesboro, who was a B-24 pilot. He didn't get overseas until after the war was over. He said, yeah, I belong to that outfit. I'll meet you, and we'll go for a ride together. We went over there. 300 smackers for a half hour. And, oh, I'm sorry.
I don't see how that's sorry.
Anyway, I went back over on, this was on a Thursday, I went back over on a Friday, and they still couldn't get enough people at 300 to fly. And they said to me, well, how far is it from where you live to Lancaster? I said, oh, about as far as it is down here, maybe a little further. They said, you come to Lancaster tomorrow, we'll guarantee you a ride if we have to take you up by yourself.
Thank you.
And then I went over to Lancaster the next morning, got there about 8 o'clock, and man, you couldn't see halfway down the runway. So I knew we weren't going to fly, not until clear. So I finally ended up getting a ride. And I enjoyed it very much. I got home, my wife said, well, how was your ride? I said, fine, but it wasn't worth $300. She said, what do you mean? I said, hell, they paid me $150 a month to fly it for 20 or 25 hours a month in combat. And I'm paying them $300 for a half hour. So, I'm going to tell you that on my 45 missions, give me a date during 1945, any date. Give me your birthday. April what? 17th. April 17th. April 18th, I flew over Formosa, Duran, carried frag bombs. It took us 9 hours and 20 minutes. We flew out of Clark Field, and we got flak. Give me another date.
May 8th.
Huh?
May 8th.
May 8th. May 9th, we hit Canton, Tine-Ho Aerodrome. Canton was in China. Mission was 12 hours long. We had 34 120-pound bombs. And all we saw was a couple of airplanes flying off our wing that day. We know
When is on the way to Okinawa?
when?
April 1st.
April 1st, you were on your way to Okinawa. I was grounded. I was at Clark Field.
That's September 2nd.
From the 30th of March, 20th of March to the 15th of April, we didn't fly.
September 2nd.
December the 2nd,
September 2nd.
or September the 2nd. September? That's what I'm wondering.
Not the first week of March.
I'll have to watch
It was first week of August.
First week of August. That was notable. 1st of August, flew over Nagasaki. You ever heard of that? We carried 6 1,000 pounds of bombs. It took us 7 hours and 30 minutes. And we bombed ships along the docks. Nagasaki looked an awful lot like the Chesapeake Bay, Baltimore area from the air. If you've ever flown into Baltimore Washington Airport, how the bay comes up there and the docks all around, that's the way Nagasaki. We sunk the ship that was along the side of the docks and run our bombs into the
I saw that.
Did you fly over Hiroshima?
Hiroshima. I don't think so. Where was that? Tell me where it was.
August, probably the 5th or 6th.
On the 6th of August, the day they dropped the bomb on Hiroshima, we were flying over Kagoshima, which is a small island off the east coast of Kyushu. We had 12 500-pounders that day. And we were flying off of Aishima Island, which is a small island off the coast of Okinawa. Or, Okinawa. Yeah, what date?
Hiroshima. Okinawa?
Yeah.
There.
The island where Ernie Powell was killed. The first thing I saw when they drove us, picked us up on the airstrip, we ferried the planes up, and you just don't land a B-24 with a load of bombs. But we did. We took 6,000 pounds from Clark Field on every one of our planes that we flew up there. And I guarantee you, we spun out the landing, because the landing gear wasn't all that good on that airplane. Okay, the most notable mission, yes. On the 9th of August, we were flying over Honshu, Iwakuni. We had frag bombs. It took us 8 hours and 30 minutes. We flew off of Aishima. No flak. We were out circling the east coast at 16,000 feet, and we felt the shock when the bomb hit Nagasaki. And inside of 2 or 3 minutes, the mushroom cloud was as high as we were. On the 11th 11th, we went back over to assess the damage. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't ever hope to live to see an atomic bomb hit anything here in these United States. Everything was level. It just looked like somebody played pickup sticks. Steel beams all over the place. There was a ship with sails on it in the center of the bay when we bombed the day before, on the 6th. And it was on the bottom, all you could see was it. That was their Annapolis. Their Navy Annapolis was in Nagasaki. Yes, sir.
Did you know they were going to drop the bomb?
Yes.
You
We
were told
did.
ahead of time.
Yes.
How many
As you can tell, I'm a little bit full of baloney. And I don't take any crap off anybody. I learned that off the back. Anyway, we were supposed to lead the squadron that day, on the 9th. And we're sitting there, and pilot, co-pilot, navigator, bombardier, always went to a briefing in the evening. And we knew where we were going. And they told us that we were going up to the Kyushu, and we were going to just fly all over the eastern side of the island and drop bombs if they shot at you, or attack, and if they didn't, just keep going. Wait a minute. I said, isn't this a waste of bombs and gasoline? The intelligence officer says, now, Etters, just shut up. Okay. At the end, the colonel in charge of the okay, this is Memorial Day. You all know what happened on the 6th. Don't look at the ground and do as we told you. Get low on fuel, drop your bombs on something. That's how we knew they were going to drop the bomb.
Why would they let you fly? Why would they even let you hear that bomb on that day?
We didn't know anything about it.
Pardon?
I didn't have any idea what it was going to do.
Oh, okay. Well, somebody knew.
I mean,
Now, somebody should have been talking.
the guy by the name of Chuck Harris, who was a photographer on Tinian, he worked out at the Navy with Jim and I. He was in charge of financial control. And he was on Tinian, and he said those people on Tinian couldn't get anywhere close to the end of the island where the atomic bomb was unloaded at night, put down in the hole, and then the B-29 was run across and blew up there. Remember, they dropped several, but not a bomb of the magnitude that they sent overseas. Some of the first that were dropped out in New Mexico. Were duds. You know, we're not perfect in this country. We have to buy a new car today. Things wrong with it. Before you make your first payment, there's something wrong with it. But I'll say this. I admire Harry Dwight Truman, and all the people who worked on that atomic bomb. Because for those of you in this room that were in that area, you knew we were going into Japan. We knew it. And we knew that we were going to have a lot of bombs dropped on Japan before the invasion. The invasion was scheduled for sometime around September, the middle of September. Here again, you had to depend on the weather. Yes, sir.
I'd like to say that I sat on Hiroshima when they dropped the bomb, and that was only 100 miles away. And then we witnessed the emissary plane came in and sat on our airstrip, and we shuttled them to Manila to sign a peace treaty. And our engineers from Hiroshima went into Atsugi D-2 to make sure that the airstrip was capable of landing our big ships on.
You're wrong when you say how far Hiroshima is from Nagasaki. It was considerably further than that. You said you were on Hiroshima when the Betty bombers came in and landed.
Yep.
They were painted white with house paint, green.
With Red Cross.
Green cross. Here it is. I was about halfway down the airstrip. And of course, as you know, there were infantry lined up on both sides of the airstrip. And the one plane came in and he took off again. And the air fighters came in and he landed. He didn't want to land, but he did.
Well, there's some of the fighters scraped their plane sitting there while they were in Manila.
I remember seeing a guy open the door. We didn't see it. Betty bomber that was painted white, and the green crosses on it, what we call a tail dragger. Yeah. And they parked it, and this guy opens the door and holds a bottle of sake out. He was afraid to get out there.
They weren't too sure about us.
No, they weren't.
But they listened to the emperor, and that was the main thing that got us in there. Good communication with the emperor, and he's the one that dictated that they do this thing. Pay attention.
I'll tell you one thing, I'm glad they got those bombs.
Hey, you had everybody going into Japan had about a 50% chance.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
It's not really a question, but I have a friend who was out in Vegas, and he was bombing the Sesame group, and they were playing baseball, and he photographed the B-29 landed with a bomb, and he told the other guys, you guys play baseball, I'll develop pictures of me help, I'll holler. And that's the words of this football, first American Hiroshima. Named Bear Williams Hudson.
I had a friend who, when I was going through gunnery school, all Bombadiers and navigators had to take aerial gunnery training. And I went through the school in Las Vegas, Nevada. In those days, Las Vegas was about 3 blocks long and had 2 or 3 casinos. And we were out at the air base, about 7 miles out of town, and the only academy street was where the golden nugget of the frontier was. And anyway, they sent us up to a place called Indian Springs, which was about 100 miles up in the desert. And it rained the whole week I was there. And they sent us up there to fly air to air training. And B-26s that pulled tow targets. And we flew around in 17s and shot out the waste windows and used painted shells with bullets, painted different colors. And when you got home, you had to go out to the airport and pull this thing up and count up the jet or whatever color you wanted. This guy, I walked into operations one day to take a look at the weather to send over to the little flyer over there and just sit there and play cards for the rest of the week. And I saw this name up on the whiteboard. It said Lieutenant Boner, B-O-N-N-A-R. I said to the operations officer, I said, now I'm a cadet at the time. I said, do you know Lieutenant Boner? He said, yes. I said, do you know where he's from? He said, yes, a little town next or close to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. I said, how about Waynesville? He said, that's it. I said, well, is he here or is he in they have barracks for the no, he said, the weather's going to be socked in all week, and he went down to Las Vegas to get married. I said, what? The way he's to deliver papers to his wife when I was a kid, and she married him, and when he went in the service, she didn't want to go with him, so she divorced him. Apparently, they decided to get married again. So I wrote him a letter. After I got back to Las Vegas, I got a letter from him that said, "Dear Bill, sorry I missed you, but went down to marry," I forgot her name. And he said, I will not be down. I checked your schedule and I know when you're going to finish. I won't be able to see you. When you get into town, give her a call on the phone. I did. And he said, I'm going to B-29. I didn't know that was pretty secret. Anyway, he went to B-29 and he was killed. It's amazing how you can meet somebody, know somebody, and the reason I knew him was because he and I used to race cars. I had a 36 Chevy and he had a 35 Ford. Well, you know, he won. I only had a 6-cylinder engine and he had a V8. And he joined the cadets early. He worked at the tube, Memphis tube. His wife had a son, and his son and my daughter were born when
We can't hear you.
Colonel, would you use the microphone, please?
Sorry about that. As you can see, the old man's getting a little wobbly. Those of you who know Hershey Park, I got another thing to tell you. There's a white piece of concrete over there, close to the old roller coaster. says horseshoe on it. It's got to be about that high and about that long. My parents brought me up there, I was about 3 years old, and it must have been cold because I had a heavy jacket on. And they took a picture of me next to that thing. And I still have it. Yes, sir.
You kept talking about heavy armament or whatever. Did you use incendiaries also in Japan?
Did I use what?
Incendiary bombs.
Incendiary bombs.
Incendiary gun. The answer to your question is yes. Did you ever hear of napalm?
Yeah.
You know that the Americans used to shoot napalm out of the tubes of their tanks and fire them into the, when the Japs got back in the holes, they'd throw them in there and burn them up. And wait just a second, I'll give you the date. Clark Field. It's 12th of June, 1945. We had 8 55-gallon drums loaded with napalm and phosphorus hand grenades tied around the outside. That was 2 in each bomb bay, 4 bomb bays, 2 bombs. And we went to Hong Kong. Now, the whole 5th Air Force went to Hong Kong that day. The 380th Bomb Group, the 90th Bomb Group, the 22nd Bomb Group, and the 43rd Bomb Group. Everybody else was loaded with demolition bombs, 500 pounders, 1,000 pounders, whatever they had, 2,000 pounders. The 43rd Bomb Group had napalm. They were to go in and bomb Hong Kong, and then we were to come in and drop napalm on it and set all that trash on fire. On the way up, one of the guys in the waist called and said, "Lieutenant, you better get your butt back here. There's something on fire in the Bombay." And I went back, and in the rear bomb bay, on the right side, the top bomb, or picture a 55-gallon drum, I got bigger around about yay long. The safety wire had pulled out of the phosphorus hand grenade, and it was burning. So I immediately flipped the lever on the bottom rack. That bomb went away through the bomb bay door, took the bomb bay door with it. Then I flipped the other one, and it went down. Now you can imagine standing there. The catwalk was about that wide. And I'm looking at these bombs going down, knowing that one of them was going to blow before it hit the ground. Or hit the water, actually. We were on our way. So I went up to the cockpit. Colin said, "Now what the hell did you do?" told him what happened. And he looked down, and of course it was fire down on the ocean where the napalm. We took the rest of the bombs over to Hong Kong and dropped them. And when I last saw Hong Kong that day, it was nothing but flames. And that napalm was out in the water. You know what sampans are? They were boats that people lived on. And you could just see that napalm eating up those sampans in the air. That's the only incendiary type bombs that we carry. 29s use some incendiaries on Tokyo. They burned Tokyo with incendiaries. They were something else. A lot of people actually were killed by having to go out into the Tokyo River to get some air, and all the bombs and burning and everything ate up all the oxygen, and they were dead. Yes, we're back there.
Okay, Clark Field had been the major air base before the war, and of course had been occupied by the Japanese.
Yes, sir.
What was it like when your group was finally based there? Was it, really messed up as far as, or had they cleaned it up? Or?
Prior to the fall of the Philippines, Clark Field was a fighter base. The airstrip was approximately 5,000 feet long. Coming back from a mission on Formosa, we had taken a few hits in our gas tanks, and Clark Field was considered an emergency landing field. We had just taken it. The infantry had just taken it. They were still fighting back in the woods. And we landed on that strip. And all they would give us was two 275-gallon trailers full of gasoline. Now, remember, these engines are 1830 engines, and they drank gas like nobody's business. But that finally got us back to Mindoro. When we moved up there, approximately, let's see, sometime around the March 16th to the 20th, we moved up there. We flew our first mission out of Clark Field on the 20th. And they had extended the airstrip. No taxiways, no nothing. You landed, taxied to the end of the airstrip, and went over in the weeds and parked the airplane. When you were ready to fly, you taxied around, and if you weren't stuck in the sand, you got back on the airstrip and went up and did a 180 at the end of the airstrip and took off. Simultaneously with that, the engineers built what is now Clark Field. 2 parallel runways running approximately 45 degrees from what the old Clark Field airstrip was. And we then moved over there. Took off on a mission one day and come back, and they told us to land at the new one. And they had just about anything in there you wanted. P-38s, P-51s, P-47s, B-25s, A-20s, B-26s. That became quite an aircraft.
Hollywood flagger cover at all?
Yes, we were glad to see him.
I did too.
We didn't always have it because some of our missions were out of the range of the fighters. And of course, they would take off after we did and catch up to us. But when we looked out and saw P-47s and P-51s out there, we were very happy. We did get a few fighter attacks, one over Hong Kong. Got a few holes. So we didn't hit anybody. There was plenty.
Why did they make some of them with single tails and others with double tails?
The B-24 was initially designed with twin tails. Where's those transparencies?
This is a multi here.
In answer to your question,
This is a multi.
yeah, in answer to your question, the Navy also had B-24. And they were called the PB-4Y1, which had twin tails. And they used them, my brother was aboard one of them. He was a beekeeping he was a national air force. Navy. And they skip bombs and were used to sink shipping. And they preferred the single tail. So they had consolidated, redesigned the airplane, and they made it 10 feet longer than the fuselage, put a tail. The airplanes did not have a fall turret. They had a radar gun stuck down underneath and 2 top turrets. And the B-32, which consolidated built about 25 of them, and first time I ever saw a plane back up. We were playing volleyball one day, and that's a B-26. Oh, it is. It's got 4 engines. Big around. So we jumped the Jeep and went down the airstrip. Plane came in, landed, taxied around. When we went into the revetment area, we had to lock the left brake, go in, do a 180 so that the plane was ready to come out into the taxi. This joker was going into the revetment area, and he came up the taxi strip, pulled over here, and reversed the pitch on the props and backed it. We're standing there.
Why did they change the planes they called it the privateer?
And because
The single stabilizer, they called that the privateer then, you know? Why did they change the name?
The Navy.
Yeah, the Navy.
they change everything. Maybe changes everything. You didn't learn that. Be careful, Colonel.
Navy.
Let me tell you something. I was Army Air Corps. Okay? Came out in 1946, and they formed the Air Force in 1947. So all my records and everything were sent to the Air Force. I have orders that made me a first lieutenant in the Air Force Reserve. Well, the government, in its infinite wisdom, never follows their word. And they were giving us retirement points just to belong, just to be. Well, on the 1st of August of 1945, or 1949, they decided that they weren't going to give us any retirement points. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm not going to be in the reserve if I'm not going to get retirement points. So I looked into it, and I joined a Army National Guard, Corps of Military Police, with an MP background. And I became a company commander of that particular unit in Waynesboro. And I ended up later being a member of the 104th Armored Cav. So I went from Air Corps to Air Force to Pennsylvania Army National Guard. And ended up driving tanks and flying helicopters and that kind of stuff. And I spent a total of 3.5 years in the whole country.
Bill, did you have the Norton bomb sight?
Sir?
Did you have the Norton bomb sight?
I sure did. I could tell you how many gears were in it, how many teeth were on each gear.
And how accurate was it?
Just as accurate as the guy operating. Here's a picture of the Norton bomb sight. Here's another one here. The Air Force had 2 bomb sites, the Norden and the Sperry. The Norden was a little more complicated than the Sperry, and it was more accurate. But it was a wonderful piece of equipment. Going through Bombadier school, we had a wooden model of just the bomb sight, not the base of it, where the gyroscope wasn't operated. The automatic power water. And we had to know we weren't going to be working on that bomb sight. All we were going to be doing is using it. We had to know every gear, the rotation of it, the number of teeth, what gear it was merged with, and what it did. And I still don't understand why our training was that comprehensive. Yes, sir.
Where'd you get the flag?
Sir?
Where'd you get the rising sun?
Oh, that's not my fault. That's not my fault. The only thing I have these things are very valuable. Somewhere in the archives federal government is my name, rank, serial number, and the numbers that are on these flags. See that serial number? We had to carry these in our pocket in case we got shot down. This was Japanese, Chinese language. And this one had the American flag on it. And it has 1, 2, 3, 4, then if we lived, when we got to the ground, we put soda.
Don't they also offer rewards?
I never did know how much.
$1,000.
I had a friend from Chambersburg who was shot down over China. He was flying B-24s, and he was shot down. About all they were using it for was to ferry gasoline to the fighters in China. We had what we called a Bombadier tank, made out of rubber, self-sealing. It would hold 500 gallons of gas. And they were putting one in each Bombay. So that would be 2,000 gallons of gas added to the fighter. He got shot down, and he had one of these. And the Chinese took him into a hospital, and they took his left leg off, and notified America. He came back, and they gave him a wooden leg. He was called Dave. These are maps that we were carrying in the pockets. Now imagine, we flew like this, okay? As we got higher, we put on jackets, micro-flying suits, that sort of thing. Put a flying suit on first, it just looked like a blanket. The wires in it looked like long johns. Put them on, you plug them in, and get the award. As you know, temperature. Does anybody know what the temperature drops per 1,000 feet? Right. Centigrade or Fahrenheit?
Fahrenheit.
Centigrade, right. 2 degrees per 1,000 feet. So you can take off the temperature 90 degrees and go up to 20,000 feet and yes, sir.
Would you briefly relate the high points of your military service? For instance, induction, how you were selected for the Air Corps, and Bombadier, where you got your Bombardier training, when you trained with the your crew, and then where you went overseas?
I was drafted on the 9th of February, 1943. I had graduated from high school in June of 41, and I went to a Penn State at Palo Alto, had a expedited engineering course, which is the first semester of college engineering. And I went there for 3 months, and then I went to work at Fairchild Aircraft in Hagerstown. And I worked over there as a production planner. We were working on experimental airplanes at that time, and we were building a twin-engine trainer, and it was to be built out of plywood, and I had to figure out how many board feet there were. Now you figure how many board feet is in a piece of plywood that long and about like that. Anyway, they sent me down to Burlington, North Carolina. They took over a silk stocking factory down there, and they sent me down there to be an assistant to the general factory superintendent. When I got there, he said, just the guy I'm looking for. He said, you're not going to do what they said you're going to do, you're going to do what I said. I ended up with a transient. Does anyone know what a transient leveling instrument is? It's on a dry tripod, you look through and level. Ended up setting jigs to make this plywood aircraft. When I was there, they changed the law from 21 to 18, and I'm down there in Burlington the first part of February, and I get a phone call one night, and it was my dad, and he said, I thought you were going to get a deferment. I said, well, they told me they were going to get me a deferment. He said, well, you didn't get one. He said, you're supposed to report for induction next Tuesday. I said, okay, I'll be home. So the next day I got on the phone to Hagerstown and said, hey, I'm coming home to go into the Army. Have a desk and a chair for me because I'm going to work there for a day or two before I go in. Because I want my job back when I come back. Anyway, I ended up being drafted. Went to Fort Meade, Maryland, where they give you shots, clothes, that kind of stuff. And I took a bunch of tests, and they said, what would you like to do? I said, I want to fly. Did you ever fly? No, but I built them. Okay, so all my friends that went down with me from Waynesboro on Tuesday shipped out on Thursday night, and there was about 3 of us there that didn't ship out. I don't know what the heck's going on. So anyway, we shipped out on Friday night. On Saturday morning, we ended up in Washington, D.C., and we rode a train, and on Saturday night, we were in Jacksonville, Florida, and they came through and said, okay, you're all in the Air Force. You're going to Miami Beach for basic training. So that's where I ended up taking basic training for 5 weeks. While I was there, I went through a bunch of tests again, and you know how the Army is. They finally classified me, and they said, you have your choice of going to Officers Candidate School or Aviation Cadet Training. And if you don't select either of those two, we'll send you to radio school. Well, I ended up going to radio school, not because I didn't want to go to the aviation cadet, but because you had to get on the list. Anyway, I went to Scottsfield, Illinois, and I was there 5 weeks, and while I was there, I maxed the aviation cadet test again. And they shipped me up to Truxfield, Wisconsin. It's a pre-radar school. I never heard of radar. I didn't have the slightest idea what radar was. I lived in tar paper shacks out in the swamp. No airplanes around there. So I was there for 5 weeks, and I got called into the office, said, you're shipping out the next 2 days. don't go back to class, you're going to cadets. Where did they ship me? Back to basic training again, Shepherd Field, Texas. Was there for 5 weeks, praying that I'd get to Gettysburg College because I knew they had a college training detachment there. And that was the closest to Mayfield. I ended up going to University of Buffalo, New York. That's the closest I got to home. My wife came, my girlfriend then, and we got married. And I shipped out of there, went to Nashville, Tennessee, went through all that training again, and all that by the left flank, by the right flank, by the rear march, and that kind of stuff, to waste time, and took another batch of tests. And they asked you at the end of the test, what do you want to do? I said, I want to fly P-38s. Now, the rumor had it that you weren't going to fly P-38s if you were over 6 feet. And I'm 6 feet 2. Anyway, I ended up as a Bombardier candidate, what it was. And I later found out that they had 2 ambidexterity tests that I was ambidextrous, and that's just what you need to operate the bomb sight. Be able to twist the knobs with one hand one way and the other hand the other. I didn't know it at the time, but I was a PO. I wanted to fly P-38. So I got sent to Santa Ana, California for preliminary pre-flight school. And graduated from there about the middle of January 1944. I had been in almost a year, still going to school. They sent me to Las Vegas to gunnery school. I finished that the 9th of January, or the 9th of March. Came home. I was home exactly 24 hours. I came home by train, got into Harrisburg. My mother and dad picked me up, my wife, took me to Waynesboro, and I had to go out at midnight on Sunday night to go back to Naperville, California, about 100 miles from Las Vegas. That's where I took Bombadier's training. Then I went to Lemoore, California, and the government in its wisdom, when we graduated, we were supposed to get a 3-week leave before you went to overseas training. Well, they were short just one class of Bombardiers and one class of navigators. By that I mean they had 6 Bombardiers class schools and 6 navigator schools, and they had been taking people out of each class as they graduated and sent them to radar, special radar school to learn to operate the radar aboard the ship. And they were short, so I didn't get a leave. Ended up going to overseas training at March Air Force Base. Met the crew there. Took 9 weeks of training. Left there, went up to Hamilton Air Force Base in San Francisco and sat there for 3 weeks, hoping to be able to fly our own airplane. We knew by that time we were going to the South Pacific. And we ended up going out there on an ATC, a C-54, Hawaii and Lake Island, down to BIAC and BIAC to Nadzan. That was another wait, because that's where they processed all the new crews coming into the 5th Air Force, had to go through Nadzan. Flew one mission out of there, 2 missions out of it, and got sent up to BIAC, from BIAC to Leyte, to Mindoro, to Clarkfield, to Aishima, to Okinawa. Got on a boat on the 30th of November 1945, mad at the Army because I'm not home yet. Pull in beside a tanker and punch a big hole in the side of the APA, and had to sit there for 4 days till they welded a piece of steel on. Don't tell me about the Navy. Anyway, we got on this APA. We knew at that time that we were going to Fort Lewis, Washington. So we were allowed to go in the Navy wardroom where you could get coffee and ice cream and that sort of thing. The officers aboard. Anyway, we went in there and, we looked at the map. The ship's navigator was plotting the course where we were going. After about the 3rd day, I said, "Lieutenant?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Why in the hell are we going north? We're supposed to be going east." "Well, Lieutenant," he said, "you may not know it, but," he said, "this ship has not been in dry dock